I was 25, a year out of college, working my first grown-up job, and had been living alone in my apartment for about 6 months when I arrived home to find my phone ringing. I missed the call, checked the caller ID, and didn't recognize the number, but the area code was from my old college town, about an hour away. I went about my business, but within a couple of minutes, the same number called again. I answered.
"Hey girl, how are you? It's been such a long time."
Hi, who's this?
"Girl, it's Mandy. What are you up to?"
I knew 4 Mandys, and none lived in my college town, and none of them called me girl all the time. Mandy who?
"Oh my gosh, we have so much to catch up on. So you've moved back to our hometown. That's great. Where are you working? Are you still dating that guy from high school? I so thought that y'all would end up together. How are your parents? Where do you live? What are you up to tonight?"
Wait, this was the 5th Mandy? Mandy Jones from high school? I mean, we'd been friends when we took dance in elementary school, but we'd long lost touch. Why in the world would she be calling me now? This didn't feel right. Hey. Yeah, so I'm working at a local business in my hometown. What are you up to?
"Oh, that's great. I always knew that you'd really be somebody. So where do you live now? Are you still dating that guy from school? That really cute one?"
This was weird. I had one boyfriend in high school, but he attended a different school, and we broke up after a couple of months. Hardly a love story for the ages. So, this is Mandy who again?
"Girl, Mandy, come on now."
And she continues blathering on, asking all kinds of personal questions, which I kept dodging. She kept wanting to know where I lived and what about the cute guy from school. Okay, look, I don't know who you are and I have no idea how you got this number.
Mandy Roper. Girl, I know it's been a while, but you should know that. We played volleyball together. You wrote this number in my yearbook, and I just came across it and I thought we should catch up.
At this point, all the red flags were up. There's a few things that you should know about Mandy Roper. Number 1, she sounds less like a chirpy valley girl and more like someone who started smoking a pack a day at age 4. 2, while we did play volleyball together, I guarantee if you asked her, Mandy would tell you we played basketball together. Mostly because, 3, basketball is the reason Mandy Roper hated my guts. I was one of a handful of freshmen on the varsity team, and within 2 weeks of joining the team, had made an enemy of one of the scariest bitches on the team. It's a very long, very silly teenage girl drama that isn't relevant to the rest of this tale. But just keep in mind that Mandy would have rather told me to go fuck myself with a rusty spork than have tea and a chat. And 4, I'd gotten that phone number when I moved into my apartment 6 months prior, so there's no way that I could have given it to her in high school. Also, I would have faked my death before purposely giving that crazy lady my number, so I told Mandy Roper as much. You don't sound like Mandy Roper. I couldn't have given you this number in high school because I've only had it for a couple of months. And Mandy Roper hates me. She is the last person who would have ever given a crap about what I'm doing right now. Who is this, really? Seriously, who are you?
Fuck you.
I had several hang-ups at my office, and a rose was left on my doorstep that my then boyfriend denied having left. I was literally clueless about stalking and harassment and whatnot, so I wasn't really sure what to do. After it seemed the hang-ups weren't going to stop, I called a friend who still lived in my college town and asked her cop husband what to do. He took the number and looked it up for me, and then called the house. The most he could figure out was it was a little old lady who lived alone, and seemed thoroughly confused by the whole story and swore that no one else could have used her phone. My dear friend Mandy must have been someone close to that little old lady though, because all of it stopped after he made that call. It wasn't until years later that I realized why someone chose to pretend to be Mandy Roper. We'd played volleyball together one single year, and it just so happens that we were seated next to one another in the team photo in the yearbook. We were both smiling in that pic. We'd simply gotten used to ignoring each other by then. So, someone, somewhere, got their hands on an 8-year-old yearbook from someone I went to school with, looked me up, picked the person sitting beside me in a team photo, and then called and harassed me for a couple of weeks. I sit here, 14 years later, still unclear on the who, what, when, where, and why, and even how. I have no reason to think that the cute boy from high school was actually involved. Seriously, we had broken up nearly 7 years prior and had no contact after we graduated. I initially thought that it was my college's ex's ex Becky, who he dated before me and had always disliked me. She still lived in the college town, but I never could tie her to the little old lady and the phone number in question. Also, the college ex swore Becky was way too timid to try something like that. She'd be more likely to cry and write volumes of poetry while listening to Jewel or something. I eventually, belatedly of course, realized that it had to be a direct result of dating then-boyfriend Joe Dirtbag, because I'm fairly certain that he had a girl in every port, so to speak, and most of them were crazy as a cat in heat. Mandy Roper faded into the ether. I do see the real Mandy Roper though, and we avoid one another in the grocery store. She still looks like she wants to hunt me down and stuff me in a locker. One of the creepier experiences that I've had was back in 2013, maybe August. I had planned a 7 to 8 day hike up in Perthshire, Scotland. Both my friend and I were experienced enough to set up a tent, keep ourselves warm, and to know when something was a little weird. This was maybe the 3rd day into our extremely long hike. We had reached Glenshee, a small hamlet, literally on the side of a spittle of Glenshee, a relatively small mountain, but steep enough to give you a challenge. We had reached the top just before early evening, and the next village was over 10 miles away in the direction that we wanted to be. Luckily, although thinking back, was it really, there was a bothy on the mountaintop, set back a little, near open sparse grassy hillock. There were no sheep around, which I thought was weird, but it was, as I said, pretty sparse. We decided to sleep in the small cabin, which from the outside looked warm enough and dry, which was the inviting thing. Inside, other people had clearly made themselves known to others. On every piece of wood, on every surface, was a name, a saying, anything to leave a mark on the mountain cabin's walls. My friend wasn't, I would say, as confident as I was about staying, but we figured one night would be fine, and it started hailing outside, and we weren't about to abandon the dry bed for the night. Everything was fine in the bothy as we set up our camping rolls and sleeping bags under a far wall, away from the large door and front-facing small windows to the mountains around us. We were both a little nervous to sleep that night, but in my logic, I had moved a wooden bench from one of the walls underneath the door handle to keep it from either blowing open as we slept, or something else opening it. In hindsight, this was probably a good move for the horrible gale-like night to come. It had reached maybe 2 a.m, and I remember waking up to hearing a woman's voice. At first, I thought it was my friend, but the pitch was too high and the location of it far away from me, and my friend was sleeping right next to me. I tried to settle back down, only to hear a tap on one of the front windows. As we were behind a wall, I didn't dare creep forward to look, but I knew that it wasn't a tree branch as there were none. But the wind was strong enough for something to blow up and hit the window maybe. Except, again, I hear a woman speak, only louder. And then another voice, much lower, almost follow and repeat a similar sounding noise. I couldn't clearly make out the words, but it was then that my friend, who I hadn't known had woken up, asked, "Can you hear the voices?" I nodded and we crouched closer to the wall for some semblance of protection from the sounds. The creepiest part was the tapping then started up again, like someone was tapping on the windows. And then the door handle started to shake, both at the same time. So there had to be two people out there in the very early morning, in the middle of nowhere, trying to come into the bothy. My friend went to crawl for the door, but I pulled her back as every sound had stopped except the wind and the rain. Then we heard the tapping again, very slow and rhythmical against the glass, only this time there was a tap and then a scratch. I think at that moment we knew had it have been people wanting to come in, they would have spoken up. However, the tap and the scratch noise continued for what felt like forever. Whenever we moved, it would stop and continue once we retreated to our corner. We must have fallen back to sleep, but I can remember having my hand clenched on my multi-tool from my camping kit as I sat in the dark, dreading what was outside. In the morning, only a few hours after the noises, perhaps 5:45 or 6 a.m., we awoke to no wind again, some light sunshine, and a very quiet mountaintop. I braved the outside first, and could tell from the rain that we were in for a muddy hike to our next village. The first thing I looked for were footprints, boot prints, tire tracks, anything to prove the noise had been people. I searched all around the cabin, and even up into the surrounding mountain above the cabin. The only prints that I could find or see were my own. On the way back to the bothy, my friend was packed and ready to leave, and so was I. But she pointed out something in the window that I hadn't noticed. One large handprint on the glass, horribly greasy looking and large. Only one. I can only say that we left quickly and felt the need to keep looking back for at least 5 miles. It was super creepy, and we both rarely talk about it.